Hunter x Hunter is returning in just a couple of days, so I thought it could be useful to make a full recap of the entire story. And we're gonna do it in under 1 hour. So let's not waste any time and get right into it. The show begins with Gon catching a giant fish so he can attend the hunter exam. He says bye to his aunt and then boards a boat full of candidates, where he meets Kurapika and Leorio. They run into a storm, get into an argument, and then save a twink. The trio then passes a bunch of nonsensical tests, teams up with some Pokemon, before finally getting to the actual exam. Once there, they meet Hisoka, Tampa, Killua, and this nutcracker guy. The exam begins with a 60-kilometer run, which knocks out about half the candidates. This is followed by another run that goes through a bog. Hisoka also comes close to killing Kurapika and Leorio, but Gon jumps in to save them. They all make it to the second phase and promptly fail, along with every other candidate. The end. Just kidding, Netero jumps in to save the day and scolds Menchi. They agree on another challenge for the second phase, which is basically bungee jumping without the bungee. All the major characters make it through once again. They take a night flight to the third phase, and Kurapika and Leorio take a nap. Meanwhile, Killua and Gon play a game with Netero. Killua gets mad and kills some people, which is a totally normal reaction, and Gon accomplishes a little victory before taking a nap. They arrive at the third phase and get stuck with the majority rules puzzle and Tampa. They all get past a bunch of phases, including this 5v5 gauntlet, but they only make it out thanks to some quick thinking by Gon. At this point, there are only like 30 examinees left, and they're all brought to an island where they're forced to collect 6 points based on their tags. Here's how it works. Gon unfortunately gets Hisoka's tag, so he decides to train in order to take it. Meanwhile, Kurapika saves Leorio, and they get his card and one other. Gon then stalks Hisoka, and Hisoka gets horny after an encounter with Kurapika and Leorio. The horniness allows Gon to get Hisoka's card, but shortly after he is defeated by his hunter, who is then defeated by Hisoka. Hisoka talks with Gon and basically sets up the plot for the next arc. Meanwhile, Killua easily steals 3 tags from these guys. Gon helps Kurapika and Leorio find Leorio's tag in a cave, and after some breathtaking suspense, they all pass, along with Hisoka, the Nutcracker, and a few others. This brings us to an interview and then the final tournament phase, which works in reverse of a normal tournament. Only one loser will be eliminated, but no one is allowed to kill their opponent or else they automatically fail and everyone else passes. Gon wins his first match against Hanzo by passing out. Kurapika wins his match against Hisoka, Hanzo wins his match against Pakal, Hisoka wins his match, and Pakal wins his. Then the Nutcracker reveals itself to be Illumi and brainwashes Killua into killing the old dude, making everyone else pass by default. Gon gets mad after he wakes up, but it's already been determined that Killua will be disqualified regardless of the circumstances. The 7 hunters receive their licenses, Illumi and Hisoka have a creepy conversation, and we learn a little bit more about Jing. Gon, Kurapika, and Leorio head to Kukuru Mountain in order to save Killua from his family. They open a really heavy door while Killua is being tortured by his obese brother. Then Gon has to get past Canary, and does so with pure willpower and a bullet. We then get a bit of Killua and Canary's backstory, and we're then introduced to Zeno and Silva. Killua and Silva have a little bonding moment and make the promise never to betray their friends. The rest of the gang plays a game with Godo and wins. They reunite with Killua, and we learn that Gon wants to return the tag to Hisoka. Then Leorio and Kurapika go their own ways, while Killua and Gon head to Heaven's Arena to earn some money and to train. Upon arrival, they quickly start ascending floors with no issue, except for this little dude Zushi, who gives Killua a bit of trouble. What's more concerning is his energy, which reminds Killua of his brothers. He asks Zushi about it, and his master, Wing, interrupts them. The duo is then invited over to Wing's place, so he can teach them about Nen, but it's not really Nen. Killua realizes this and explains to Gon why. Zushi also knows Wing lied, and Wing explains it's because of how dangerous real Nen is if it's used by the wrong people. He then destroys Zushi's juice to demonstrate. Killua and Gon quickly make their way to the 200th floor, where a certain clown is waiting for them. He prevents them from passing using his pedo powers, but Gon and Killua try to force their way through. Wing stops them so they don't hurt themselves and agrees to teach them real Nen. They head back to his place, and he explains the 4 fundamental principles of Nen. We don't have time for a full Nen explanation now, but I already made a separate video for just that. They learn the only defense against Nen is Nen itself, and they begin their training. We learn that everyone above floor 200 is a Nen user, and shortly after, their pores are opened, and they learn how to control the energy for the first time. They head back and get through Hisoka's run easily, and Gon is ready to fight. Hisoka won't fight him until he gets 1 win in the 200s, and we get a quick look at a bunch of weirdos before Gon and Killua register for the floor. We learn how the 200s work, and Gon and Killua do not care at all. They talk to the cripple crew and head to their room, where Gon's match is immediately scheduled for the following day. Gon fights the top guy, and well, he loses pretty badly. He wakes up with a broken arm, and it'll take 4 months to heal. Wing slaps Gon in response to his poor plan and for allowing himself to get hurt. He then makes Gon wear a promise thread, and he has to wear it for 2 months. Shortly after, Hisoka has a match with Castro. Castro seems to be doing quite well at first, but then Hisoka starts messing with him and he loses immediately. Killua talks to Gon about the match, and he's very impressed by what happened. Meanwhile, Machi heals Hisoka, and they break down what happened in the match before Machi informs Hisoka that the troop is meeting soon. Gon and Killua decide they need to learn more about Nen. Oh, and Hisoka isn't actually in the troop. Gon gets his promise almost thrown off, and the kids watch Hisoka's match with Wing, learning Gyo in the process. The kids decide to practice in Gon's room and run into some losers on the way. After training, Zushi gets kidnapped by the guy with no hand, but he quickly gets rescued by Killua on the condition that Killua has a match with the hand guy. Killua and Gon continue training before Killua forces the hand guy to leave the city, and they both beat the remaining members of the other crew. Gon begins his preparations to fight Hisoka, and the boys begin training Hatsu. After a few more weeks, Killua and Gon graduate Wing's program, and Gon passes the secret hunter exam. We get an overview of how everyone else is doing, and it's time for Gon to fight Hisoka. They start, and after a few intense exchanges, Gon lands one hit. He gives Hisoka his tag back, and then Hisoka starts actually trying. Things go downhill for Gon very quickly. He loses, but he completed his goal, so him and Killua decide to leave Heaven's Arena and head towards Yorknew, stopping on Whaletail Island on the way. They have a fun night in the wood, and Mito gives Gon a box from Jing. He and Killua use Nen to open the box, and inside is a cassette player and a ring and a memory card. They listen to the tape, and Jing basically admits he's a bad parent and person, but he's also riding a dinosaur on top of a dragon, so he's pretty much clear. Gon turns off the tape, and the tape records over itself. They acquire a joy station and insert the card and discover it's for a game called Greed Island. After some searching, they find out the game is worth over 5 billion Jenny, and only 100 copies were ever produced. They get two leads on the game. One is a hunter website, and the other is the Yorknew City auction in September. They depart the next day. We then switch to Kurapika's perspective and see some of his training. We learn that he is a conjurer, and we learn more about how Nen categories overlap. Then Kurapika lands a gig with a client who collects human trophies. This will put him in Yorknew for the auction. Then he gets mad for a second and passes a mouse girl who can hear heartbeats. We then get introduced to a bunch of characters, but they're not that important since most of them will be dead soon anyway. Kurapika arrives at the mansion and must find a human trophy to prove his worth. He gets angry at the sight of the eyes, but he's wearing black contacts so no one can tell. After a short monologue, he departs. Or tries to, but is ambushed by some guy's Nen ability. Kurapika and Basho figure out what's going on quickly and stop the assault, and Kurapika demonstrates the power of his dowsing chain. They manage to escape the mansion, and at the same time, a memory card has been delivered to Miluki, and Gon and Killua arrive in Yorknew. They head to a computer and talk to a hologram about the game. They learn no one has beaten Greed Island, and there will be 7 copies up for auction. Starting price is 8.7 billion Jenny. They try to make money off of auctioning, but get scammed out of most of it. They are 12-year-olds. Meanwhile, Kurapika gets hired by the family and is given the mission to protect the boss, Neon Nostrad. And then we get introduced to some of the Phantom Troop. The rest of the troop is on their way, and Neon demonstrates her ability. We then learn that fortunes can be quite foreboding, and Hisoka is the last member of the troop to arrive. Chrollo wants to steal everything at the auction and gives the troop members permission to kill. Then the auction starts, and Gon buys a phone before Leorio runs into them. They tell Leorio about Greed Island and start to form a plan. Meanwhile, Miluki departs from Yorknew because he can't get the duplicate to work. Then Kurapika learns he's on watch duty for the auction. Leorio plans to scam people using Gon's arm wrestling, and the only person he struggles against is Shizuku. Then Neon throws a fit, and some members of the troop depart while Hisoka is being creepy. Then Kurapika and Melody have a conversation, and then the auction starts. The Mafia gathers in the auditorium, and they are immediately mowed down by Franklin. Anyone who escapes is killed by Shizuku, who then also takes care of the bodies. All of the auction goods disappear, and it's because they were moved before the troop could get there. Uvo calls Chrollo for their next command, and they decide to lure out the Shadow Beasts by massacring Mafia members. Uvo starts killing, and Kurapika shows up shortly after. Then some of the Shadow Beasts arrive as well, but they don't stand a chance against Uvo either. Meanwhile, the rest of the troop is playing cards. After the beasts lose, Kurapika loses it and starts to approach the battlefield, but is calmed down by Melody. But Kurapika still wants to get to Uvo, and he does it with only one little hitch. Or should I say pin? Actually, it's a needle, but you get what I'm saying. The troop chases after them, but they're intercepted by the rest of the Shadow Beasts, including the one that took the merchandise from the auction house. They take care of the beasts quickly, and everyone returns to the city. Kurapika and the others interrogate Uvo, but it doesn't really work. The troop has the merch, and Shellnark manipulates a guy into giving the troop Uvo's location. At the same time, Kurapika and Hisoka meet in what I can only assume is Hisoka's house. Then Hisoka gets horny and they exchange information. Then the troop rescues Uvo and kills the mob guy. Kurapika returns to the hotel and is appointed as the new leader. Uvo drinks a ton of beer, and we learn that Shellnark is also a hunter as well. He tells Uvo the location of the Nostrad family business, and Uvo departs, finding Kurapika shortly after. Meanwhile, Gon gets involved in some underground wrestling, but it gets cancelled so participants can hunt the Phantom Troop instead. Kurapika and Uvo arrive in the desert, and Kurapika leaves the desert alone. The troop assumes Uvo is dead and changes their plans. Gon notices a knife on sale based on its Nen. He and Killua realize they can use Nen to find valuable items without any appraisal training, and use this to make money. They sell the items and almost get swindled, but Zephile saves them. They exchange information and decide to work together. Then Gon and Killua leave to trace Machi and Nobunaga. Meanwhile, Chrollo does some research into the Nostrada family, and Zeno and Silver are hired to hunt the troop. The chase begins, but it doesn't take long for Gon and Killua to be captured. They're brought to the troop's meeting place, and Gon loses an arm wrestling contest a bunch of times. Nobunaga and Gon express their differences in morals before Gon wins a match, and then Nobunaga tries to recruit Gon. He says no, and the troop divides up to hunt Kurapika. Meanwhile, Killua has an identity crisis. Then Gon hatches an escape plan, and it works. Killua is back to normal, and they decide to contact Kurapika. Neon escapes surveillance and accidentally bumps into Chrollo. They head to the auction, and Chrollo gets his fortune read and it confirms Uvo's death. Krillo knocks out Neon and is then tracked by a bunch of assassins. At the same time, the troop begins their massacre in honor of Uvo's death. This delays Neon's departure and prevents Kurapika from hunting the troop. Then Gon and Killua call Kurapika. They want to help and Kurapika has to call them back. The mob bosses are getting impatient, so Silva shuts them up and Kurapika and the Zoldycks search for Krollo. But Kurapika gets a phone call before he can find him. Then the Zoldycks kill Krollo, or they would if their contract with the Tendons hadn't run out because, well, they're dead. The Tendons claim that the troop has been killed, but it's really a trick from the troop so they can steal goods by making copies. Then Kurapika learns this fake truth and starts drowning in an indescribable emptiness. But at least he bought some eyes. He calls Gon and tells him the troop is dead and drowns some more. He then meets up with Gon and Killua and the troop gets their fortunes read. Half of them will die if they don't leave Yorknew now. Then Hisoka texts Kurapika that the bodies were fake, and the Mafia calls off the hunt for the troop. Nobunaga gets in a fight with Hisoka because he told Kurapika about Uvo, but the rest of the troop stops him. Krollo quickly figures out why Hisoka gave out this information and devises a plan for the troop. Meanwhile, Kurapika explains his powers to the rest of the gang, and they develop a plan to capture Paku. Killua heads out for reconnaissance and notices way more buildings than before. Kurapika dispatches Melody to help, but the troop is already on the move and looking for the Scarlet Eyes. They arrive in the city and Kurapika gets mad and starts tailing them. This leads to Gon and Killua getting captured again. Then Squalla is killed by Nobunaga, and that trio learns Kurapika's identity. Gon and Killua get taken to a hotel, where Leorio explains everything in code. The lights go out, Krollo is captured, and a hostage exchange is set up. Then Krollo and Kurapika argue in the car. Then Kurapika explains everything to Paku and Nobunaga. The troop is split on what to do until Franklin brings a level head to the room, literally. The exchange is successful, and Hisoka tries to fight Krollo, but Krollo's net has been sealed. Paku goes back to the troop and sacrifices herself to give information about Kurapika to the troop. Krollo heads east and Kurapika takes a nap. Meanwhile, Gon and Killua head to the auction and run into Finks and Phaeton, who tells them Paku says thanks. And finally, the auction for Greed Island is underway. Miluki and the rich guy get in a bidding war. The victor is decided easily. Gon and Killua try to join the rich guy, but they need more Nen, so they train some more and develop their own powers. At the same time, the troop steals a copy of Greed Island for themselves. Kurapika and Zeppile depart. Rich guy wins all the Greed Island games, and Gon and Killua pass the screening. They get the rundown on their contract, and Leorio departs as well. They finally enter Greed Island. They then head to a town, eat some food, and almost witness a murder. They get a quick tutorial and head out on their own because Gon gets mad. Bisky secretly follows them, and another faction forms. They get their first restricted card, and immediately it gets stolen. Meanwhile, the other faction explains their plan. Bisky tries to join Killua and Gon, but she gets denied. They head to a village and give up all of their belongings. Some troop members enter the game, and Shalnark devises a plan. Then Bisky forces the boys into some training, and they get interrupted by a barber. They use him for training and beat him in a few days. Then they dig their way to Macedora and learn more about Nen. Meanwhile, Genthuru tells everyone that he is the bomber, and they're all tapped. Hysteria breaks out, and the bomber gets the upper hand. Then the troop tries to access Greed Island from the outside world, but they are turned away by Razor. Killua leaves the game to take the hunter exam, and Gon continues training, but gets interrupted by a guy who tells them about the bomber. He then summons a Nen beast to get rid of the bomb, just as Genthuru blows up the other bombs. Killua finishes the exam in like an hour and returns to the game. They learn Gon ran into Krollo, but it's actually Hisoka who is there to find a Nen exorcist. It also seems like something happened to Neon. The Greed Island gang starts collecting cards. Everyone starts trading, and Killua develops a gambling addiction. Then Segura gets some cards stolen by Genthuru, and the Gon gang collects 45 rare cards. They cure the villagers of their disease and get the lucky Alexanderite, and then get invited to a meeting where they exchange information and decide to collaborate to acquire card 2 in order to stop Genthuru from winning. They discover a quest that requires 15 people and attempt it. After setting a pirate on fire, they head to Razor's base and quickly lose because the party is too weak. The team falls apart, and Gon's gang is forced to look for new partners. They find Hisoka, and he joins them because it seems fun. They then decide to recruit Segura and challenge the pirates again. It goes a lot better this time, until Razor, who challenges them to a dodgeball match. After a long and challenging battle, they win. They activate the lighthouse, and the lady turns into a card. They are quickly contacted by Genthuru, who tries to force the group to give up. They split in two and come up with a plan. Segura and Genthuru enter a game of cat and mouse, while Gon's group trains. Killua comes up with a plan, and Segura learns that the rich guy canceled the whole event because his wife died, meaning he has no reason to pursue the cards. Meanwhile, Genthuru chases Gon's gang, and they get their battles started. Bisky takes out the purple guy easily. Killua does some experimentation on the red guy, also defeating him, but Gon is being Gon. He won't continue with the plan unless Genthuru uses his power on him. Genthuru does it, and after beating, Gon wins. The trio regroups and heals everyone before Gorino gives them the rest of the cards they need. This activates the final event, which is a quiz. Gon gets the high score and gets to meet with the creator of the game and gets the prize for winning. At the same time, the Nen Exorcist leaves with Hisoka. The trio leaves the game and takes the cards they want. Bisky takes Planet Chan, and Gon and Killua take a combination of cards that allows them to use a company outside of the game. They use it to head to Jing, and Jing finally meets Gon. Except it's not actually Jing, because Jing is a dick, and it sends them to Kite instead, who saves them from a weird ant. They then talk about Gon and Kite's history, and we learn Kite's backstory and how he met Jing. They then go with Kite's team after discussing Chimera Ants for a bit, and we get a glimpse of the Chimera Ant Queen eating small animals before learning of the ant's method of evolution, phaseogenesis. We then get a new perspective of a brother protecting his sister before they become an evolutionary stepping stone for the ants. Meanwhile, the group searches for the queen but has no luck. Colt is born and starts hunting humans. A few ants are killed by men with guns, and Kite's crew determines that the queen is most likely an NGL and buy tickets to the country before talking about Didi. Pakal and Panzu are also interested in the ants and depart for NGL as well. At the same time, the queen preps for the king's birth, and the ants want to have names. The queen obliges. Hunters arrive in NGL, and the ants continue hunting. Kite's crew enters NGL under the eyes of some tour guides, and the ants start to have differences in beliefs. Meanwhile, Pakal's posse stumbles upon some dead D2 manufacturers and some ants, which he dispatches with Nen. After the encounter, he asks Panzu to send out some of her bees, and Yeonju takes over a DD facility before we learn Gyro's backstory. Yeonju declares the factory his fortress, and DD forces continue to die. The bees don't work, and Pakal plans to leave NGL, but he is captured by Zazan and Pike. Panzu runs and dispatches her bees in desperation before she meets her end. The bee reaches Kite, and he advances with just Gon and Killua. They find Panzu's desecrated remains, and a grave atmosphere sets in. The ants discuss the discovery of rare humans, and Gon's gang runs into Rama. They fight, and Rama is rescued by Colt. Rama tells him other squad leaders are eating humans. Kite's crew continues to the D2 hideout, where they encounter and defeat Yeonju's squad. We learn about Kite's ability Crazy Slots, and at the same time, Nen awakens in Rama. Meanwhile, the Hunter Association has been tasked with eliminating the ants, and Rama punches Colt at his own request. Hagia tails Kite's crew, and they get surrounded by ants. The ants challenge them to 1v1s, but unfortunately the matches get cut short. Meanwhile, the ants search for Pakal to learn more about Nen, but they can't find him, and Gon's view of the ants changes. Rama believes he can become the king with Nen, until a new player enters the game, and Hagia calls off the hunt after seeing Kite's power. Neferpitu presents themselves, and Rama bows. Pitu immediately notices Pakal, and he is taken for dissection. The ants get a full explanation of Nen from him as the crew continues towards the castle. Killua reflects on how far him and Gon have come, and Kite talks about what it means to be a hunter before he gives Gon Jing's hunter license. Meanwhile, the ants are getting rocked by Rama, and Pitu goes to test their strength on someone, which is Kite. He loses his arm, and Gon almost goes berserk, but Killua stops him and they run away. He monologues as he retreats to the entrance of NGL, where he meets Moral, Nav, and Netero, before explaining what happened. Moral scolds him, and Gon and Killua get sent away. They must beat 2 assassins if they want to return to NGL. Then Gon wakes up wanting to save Kite, and Killua falls in love. Oh yeah, and Kite's dead. The duo checks the chalkboard and runs into a creep named Palm. She is there for the same reason they are, to defeat Knuckle and Shoot. Gon realizes it's better to train without knowing their opponent's abilities, and they train with Bisky again, who's there on Palm's request. Meanwhile, Kite is put on ice, and Pitu wants a rematch. Knuckle befriends a puppy as the boys train more. Palm develops a crush, and the punitive force makes their first move as Shiapoof makes his entrance. Then Pitu develops their first ability, and the boys continue to struggle with training. They finally make it to 3 hours in Ren, and go to face Knuckle. He cries of laughter, and then gets knocked out. When he wakes up, he tries to give his chip to Gon, but he refuses to take it. The punitive force continues to kill ants while Pitu does some experiments on Kite. Palm knows the boys can't beat Knuckle, and starts to brood until Gon makes her horny. Man, why's Gon gotta be a pedo magnet? Netero keeps killing ants like nobody's business, and Yuppie is born as Pito trains Kite's corpse. Bisky sends the boys to their final showdown with Knuckle and Shoot, and Netero thinks he'll have to sacrifice someone to beat the ants. Gon and Knuckle go at it after Knuckle explains Gon's ability to him. Gon loses, and Killua carries him to their room. He trains with Bisky and gets his shit rocked. She points out his fear of losing, and says he will have to leave Gon behind if he loses to Shoot. The boys head back for their final rematch, and they both lose, by a lot. Gon's Nen gets sealed for a month because of Knuckle's overly complicated ability, and Killua plans to leave Gon after his Nen comes back. At the same time, the Ant King is born, and the other ants don't like him. The ants are loyal to the queen, and they seek help to heal her. Colt brings a white flag to Moral and Nav, and asks them for assistance. Meanwhile, the royal guards seek out some rare humans for the king, and does some stuff that I can't show on YouTube. The ants leave the hive to build their own kingdom because the queen is dead. Gon has a breakdown which makes Killua cry, and Netero cuts his hair. Most of the ants have left the hive, and the association attempts to save the queen. She names her son Meruem and dies. They find a human fetus inside her as well, which is kinda weird. Both Colt and Knuckle mourn her death. Meanwhile, Gon has recovered and starts training again. Knuckle and Shoot find Kite, and Meruem arrives in East Gorto. He quickly wipes out the entire palace, and Gon and Killua return to Palm, who is upset. But Gon can make it up to her by going on a date. Killua gets jealous and concerned. Chitu kills some people, and Gon preps for his date. Killua tails them until Rama approaches. Killua has to protect the couple from the ant, but he has trouble at first due to Illumi's training, but at least the date's going well. Turns out Illumi put a needle in him to influence his decisions, and now that it's out, he kills Rama. He returns to the pond, but Gon's gone back to the apartment by force. Him and Killua escape a crazed Palm. She uses her power to track them, but is stopped by Nav. Meanwhile, Knuckle and Moral are trying to stop Chitu. They kinda fail, but kinda succeed. Then Killua and Gon meet Kite for the first time since he's died, and the punitive force learns of the screening that the ants are going to do. Then Gon almost kills Moral, and the squad breaks into 3 groups, each assigned to a royal guard. We then take a break from a regularly scheduled program in order to watch the Phantom Troop dispatch a castle full of ants with very little issue. Gon and Killua enter East Gorto, and split up after finding a village already ravaged by the selection. Milleron trails Gon, and Knuckle and Shoot argue about the morality of trading 5 million lives for the rest of humanity. humanity. Then Gon kills some more ants. Killua is stopping Pitu's puppets, so she dispatches some lower ants to deal with him. He then runs into the sun, and we learn about the politics of the Hunter Association. Then the country is placed under martial law due to Killua's actions. Gon becomes friends with Meleron, while Killua slaughters a bunch of ants and almost dies to a game of darts. But he's saved by an octopus. Meanwhile, Meleron reveals his ability to Gon and tells us his backstory before they become partners. Gon calls Knuckle and gives him an overview of the situation. At the same time, Meruem is playing games to pass time until the selection. He easily beats every national champion until Komugi. They play Gungi late into the night. Moral uses his ability to keep the capital safe until he faces down Cheeto. They get teleported to Cheeto's domain and he takes a nap. The ants talk about the human farm in the garden and we learn more about Nov's ability. Then it begins raining and Meruem continues to lose to Komugi, but it's getting interesting. He rage quits and Moral tags Cheeto. Nov kills Flutter and we shift back to the king losing to Komugi. Meruem decides to use psychology to disrupt Komugi's rhythm, but it doesn't work because she staked her life on every single match. He tears off his own arm as an offering, which causes his own personal dick rider to come to his assistance. Meruem tries to force Komugi to play, but she refuses until he is healed. He accepts but it wears dick rider because he is being influenced by a mere human. P2 stops her end to heal the king. Nov advances on the palace because of this. We're then introduced to Bizef, a pervy survivor of the old government. He immediately falls for Palm's own infiltration plan. Nov finishes his mission and Moral distracts Leol. Palm arrives at the palace and seduces Bizef. Meanwhile, Nov has a breakdown. Moral drowns Leol, Palm gets caught, and Killua finally wakes up. He contacts Gon, and Meleron is bonding with Knuckle. Nov is out of commission, but the mission does not change. Killua and Ikalgo go to meet up with the rest of their friends. Poof wants to kill Komugi because she's dangerous to the king, and the invasion plan is laid out for us. Meruem is distancing himself from the guards so he can focus on Gungi. It makes Poof nervous. P2 wants to fight Moral, and the squad heads to Beijing, but something feels off to Killua. Komugi has a Nen-awakening from Gungi, and asks Meruem his name. He does not know. He asks his guards, and they do not know. Then he revels in his power over the weak. He goes to kill Komugi, but ends up saving her instead. The boys break down the plan, and the selection march begins. P2 is commanded to report on Komugi based on her Nen, and the first marchers arrive at the palace and are hypnotized by Shia Poof's scales. We get an overview of how everyone is feeling prior to the invasion, and Meruem experiences existentialism. 10 minutes until the invasion. A furry investigates Nov's evidence, the royal guards are banished from the second floor and above, and P2 is only allowed to use N on the first floor. Poof is afraid of how the king is developing. The furry makes progress in tracking Nov, and the heroes rejoin before the invasion begins. They determine that the king and the guards will never compromise, and that combat is basically guaranteed. And then, it's time. But before we get into that, don't forget to subscribe. You obviously like the content if you made it this far into the video, and I would really appreciate the support. We're getting close to 5,000 subscribers, and I'd love to hit that by the end of the year. Xeno and Netero dive from above using Dragon Dive, and simultaneously Moral Squad enters at the stairs. Poof rushes to Meruem, and P2 prepares for battle. She gets swatted away, and we get Netero's backstory. P2 stops herself using Dr. Blythe, and the battle with Yuppie begins. He turns into a Machamp, and then Dragon Dive hits. Gon and Killua continue up the staircase, and Knuckle lands a hit with APR. Yuppie grows a bunch of eyes. P2 floods the palace with her Nen, and Poof rushes to an empty throne room. P2 rushes to the king's actual location, where she finds Meruem cradling an injured Komugi. He asks P2 to heal her, and they do. Netero and Xeno watch this entire exchange before leaving with Meruem. At the same time, Yuppie destroys the main staircase, injuring Shoot. Moral deploys the smoke as a decoy, so Knuckle can land another hit. Shoot uses his newly developed technique to occupy Yuppie and return Moral's pipe to him. Gon and Killua head outside, passing Ikalgo before splitting up. Killua takes out 2 soldier ants and returns to Gon. The furry saw him do it and gets suspicious. Cheeto and Bravada interrupt Ikalgo, and Poof gets dramatic. Again, he ends up trapped with Moral in Smoky Jail. Gon sees the smoke and sees Meruem and Netero, who signal that P2 is inside. Gon starts to lose it. Poof spreads his wing scales towards Moral, and Killua catches up with Gon. He knows Gon does not plan to survive this fight. Meruem leaves with the elderly. Poof gets reborn, but it's really just a ploy to get out of Smoky Jail. Shoot lands a hit on Yuppie, but is sustaining damage himself. This is hard to see for Knuckle, and he rushes in until Meleron taps. Shoot reaches his limit, and Knuckle reveals himself. We get an explanation on an overly complicated elevator, and the lobster guy chases Ikalgo. Yuppie chases Knuckle, and Killua and Gon enter P2's room. Meleron does some exploration of the palace before facing down with Welfin. Gon and Killua see the situation Komugi is in, but Gon wants to fight now. He gets mad, and P2 begs him to wait. Then Cheeto dies, and Meleron leaves with Killua. Knuckle runs from Yuppie, finds Shoot, and monologues before going after Yuppie again. Yuppie gets frustrated with everyone's disappearance and the humans' resolution. He transforms destructively. This gives Knuckle an idea that could help them win. 3 minutes have passed since the battle began. Yuppie fakes getting mad, Poof escapes jail, and Ikalgo looks for Palm. His disguise gets killed by the lobster, who then gets trapped in the elevator. Yuppie and Knuckle engage again. Knuckle almost dies but is saved by Killua and lands 8 hits on Yuppie. Then Killua engages. He whips Yuppie around for a little bit before running out of electricity and running away. Bravada blasts out of the elevator and eventually falls asleep in the gas. Moral calls Poof's bluff and releases Smoky Jail, but Poof steals his pipe, leaving him with only summoned puppets. Moral assists Knuckle, and Hina saves Bizef. Then we get a lot of exposition about the exchange between Moral and Poof, and we also get an overview of everything going on. Moral tricks Yuppie, and he gets mad and explodes again. Shoot gets rescued by Nov, and the main tower collapses. Killua recharges changes and Poof joins Pitou and Gon. Yuppie masters his ability and turns into a creepy centaur, and then Moral hits his limit. Yuppie almost kills Moral, but after a change of heart and some negotiations, he leaves everyone alive. He departs to find Meruem. Nav is bald now and he brings Moral to a doctor. We also learn Meruem and Netero are at the appointed location, and the plan is already in action. They have a conversation about strength and humanity. Meanwhile, Pitou explains everything to Poof, and part of Poof leaves his body. He meets up with Yuppie and wants to kill Komugi, but they leave to find the king instead. Netero slaps Meruem, and it basically does nothing. He gets Meruem to fight by wagering his name. Ikalgo finally pulls himself together and gets in a standoff with Welfin, and Palm finally awakens as Killua finishes off his recharge. They run into each other and Killua finds out she's an enemy. Things get hairy, and they go at it until Killua has a breakdown about Gon. This breaks the walls in Palm's mind, and she is deemed a failure by Poof. Knuckle confronts Poof in the room and he explodes, leading to a time reduction on Komugi's healing. Knuckle leaves to find Poof, and Meruem and Netero begin their fight. They crash into an underground tomb and fight for a few minutes, but in the end, Meruem defeats Netero. That's when Netero activates the rose hidden within him. Then we learn what the rose is, and Yuppie and Poof rush to the blast site. Ikalgo emerges from the garage, and we learn that everything has happened in less than 30 minutes. He meets up with the rest of the punitive force and they decide to keep fighting the ants, despite their mission being completed. They take Komugi hostage, and Pitou and Gon depart for Kite's body. Yuppie and Poof find the king's burnt body and assume he's dead. He's not, but he needs energy to come back to life, so they have a good time until he's stronger than ever. Unfortunately, Meruem loses his memory, so Poof tries to eliminate Komugi in the meantime. He gets hit with bankruptcy and Palm learns the king is still alive. The trio make it back to the castle as Killua and Poof's clone play tag. Poof convinces Komugi that Killua is the enemy, and she breaks away before knocking herself out. Meruem arrives back at the palace, and Pitou and Gon are almost at Kite. Knuckle and Meloran hide in the crowd, and Pitou is manipulated by Poof and Welfin. The duo finally arrive at Kite, and Pitou tells Gon the truth. He has the breakdown of all breakdowns, and Palm sees it. She tells Killua, who departs shortly after. He arrives to see a transformed Gon beating Pitou's corpse. They talk before Gon kills Pitou, and then himself. Kinda. Meanwhile, Ikalgo sends Welfin to the royal guards as a messenger, and Yuppie dies shortly after. Then Meruem remembers Gungi, and Palm realizes they have already won. She hides Komugi deep in the warehouse. Poof vomits blood, and the message of this arc is openly displayed. Humans are far worse than the ants we look down on. Then we learn the rose is actually radioactive, and Meruem uses N finding Welfin. Poof tries to prevent them from talking, but the entire encounter just stresses Welfin into accidentally saying Komugi. Everything comes flooding back to Meruem. He departs, thanking Welfin and wishing the furry luck in finding Gyro. Wind whips across the torn battlefield, and Meruem spreads his N in the warehouse. He finds Palm and asks to see Komugi. He knows his time is limited, and seeing her is all he wants. Palm has an internal fight between her human and ant sides. Meruem asks for help again before kneeling before Palm. She agrees to tell Meruem Komugi's location, on the condition that she can watch their final moments together. Poof is dead, and the people of Beijing are not doing much better. The media lays out a different story, and Bean watches Netero's will. Diego drinks to humanity, the good and the bad. Meruem and Komugi play again, and Meruem is finally able to tell her his name. He reflects on his guards and the things he took for granted before they play again. Turn after turn, the game progresses, before Meruem admits they now share a fate. They silently agree that this is where they are supposed to be. Shortly after, they pass peacefully together. In the wake of the Chimera Ant disaster, East Gorto and NGL were placed under the control of international peacekeepers. 5 million were declared refugees, and the Midorran Union turned NGL into a nature preserve and took the riches of East Gorto. Lobster Guy stays in NGL, and Welfin leaves, optimistic about the future. Reina's aunt is reunited with her mother. Also, Kite is kind of alive, but Gon is kind of dead. Not completely, but it does not look good. On the other hand, Killua is alive, but emotionally dead. He leaves to retrieve something, and Netero's post-mortem message sets up the next chairman election with the Zodiacs, including Jing. The Zodiacs talk about who will run for chairman and how to run the election. They go with Jing's rules, which were planted for Bean earlier. Ballots are sent out and hunters begin to gather. The first round is in and it's a dud. Meanwhile, Illumi and Hisoka talk about Gon, Killua, and Aluka. Pariston requests 2 new rules to increase turnout, and we learn why Netero chose the rat as his second in command. Killua returns to his family's estate to rescue Aluka. After a talk with his father, we get Aluka's backstory and learn she can grant wishes at a price. Illumi discusses Aluka with Hisoka and fears he could die if Killua uses her. Hisoka is also concerned as it could mean Gon dying as well. They come up with a plan to kill Aluka. At the same time, Aluka kills Killua, and the chairman election is slowly progressing. Killua explains more of Aluka's rules. Here's a full list. The duo make their escape. The Butlers are tasked with escorting Killua, including Subone, but Aluka makes a request, so she has to keep her distance for now. They depart, and finally, Leorio is back in the picture. He works with Moral to ensure Gon is healed. Leorio tries calling Kurapika, but he doesn't pick up. He then punches Zheng for not visiting Gon. We then get introduced to some minor villains, and Illumi calls Killua to inform him that he wants to kill Aluka, before sending a truck to drive the car they're in off a cliff. cliff. Canary saves them, kinda. The party departs the crash scene and Killua breaks up due to a conflict of interest from the butlers. Hisoka kills Goto, and Killua forces Tsubone to use her ability. They meet at the airport and Killua ditches them before filling Moral in on Aluka's powers. Illumi and Hisoka arrive shortly after, and Illumi is forced to create some needlemen for assistance. Killua plans to use the 4th Hunter commandment to kill Illumi, and Moral knows some guys who might help. Killua lands the airship and accidentally runs into Illumi and his henchman. Nanaka is summoned, and heals Tsubone's hand. Hisoka kills the hunters chasing them, and the election is whittled down to 4 candidates. Jing wants to leave, but Cheetle wants advice. They argue and Jing stays. We then hear from the knocked out candidates, and Killua and Aluka arrive at a heavily guarded Gon. At the same time, Mizai endorses Cheetle, Cheetle endorses Leorio, and Leorio pleads to the association to help him save Gon. And then Periston endorses Mizai. We then get a long overview of how the election would play out from there. Leorio comes in first this vote, but doesn't have the majority, so another runoff is drawn. Killua and Nanaka approach Gon, and Killua gets emotional upon seeing his physical state. Upon healing, every competent hunter can feel the abundance of Nen emanating from Nanaka. Also, Illumi kind of loses it. On the verge of losing, we see Periston's true nature emerge, and it is ugly, both dispassionate and manipulative. Leorio gets impatient and wants to vote in order to save Gon, and at that moment, Gon is well, and before Leorio's eyes. They have a joyous reunion before Gon sees Jing, and they talk for a bit. Jing tries to blow him off, and everybody gets mad at him, but the election isn't actually over, so no one can leave. Periston asks Gon who should be chairman. He says Periston because Leorio wants to be a doctor. Gon then departs, and Periston wins before resigning and leaving Cheetle in charge. Illumi approaches Killua before being banished by Nanaka. Killua demands Nanaka stay inside for good, but that makes Aluka mad. Killua apologizes to Nanaka and vows to protect her. Then we learn a little bit more about the Koala Man and new Kite. The koala is trying to atone for his sins as a human and an ant. Kite decides the koala will live with him until he dies, as payment for who he killed. Then Gon arrives and apologizes. They talk for a while before Gon leaves. He finds a note from Jing saying that they will meet at the World Tree. He goes with Killua and Aluka, and they take some cute pictures while some guy talks in the back. They all thank each other for helping each other, and then Gon and Killua part ways. Gon starts his ascension of the tree, and we get a look back at the series along the way. Gon feels a connection to the tree and helps a field hiker before reaching the top. He is then greeted by some big birds and Jing. Jing then explains that he only cares about discovering things and building relationships, with the second being more important. He then explains the tree is just a sapling, and that both the tree and the Chimera Ants are from the Dark Continent. The sun sets, and Jing tells Gon to enjoy the detours. The mother bird flies overhead, and Gon returns Jing's license, before they spend the night recounting tales. As the credits roll, we see where everyone is in the world, including Kurapika. And that's it. For the anime at least. The manga, on the other hand, starts out with a bang. The Kakin Empire announces they're going to the Dark Continent, and the expedition will be led by Beyond Netero, Isaac Netero's son. The V5 wants them to follow their procedures, but Beyond is just ignoring them. Jing and Periston join his expedition team, and the Zodiacs are requested to hunt down Beyond. We shift to a government perspective and we're introduced to what happened on the Dark Continent. The Zodiacs are then tasked with exploring the continent before Beyond, but then Beyond surrenders himself to the Zodiacs because it is the easiest way to get to the continent. We then learn of the 5 calamities and the history of the expeditions. Kakin joins the V5 to become the V6, and the Zodiacs come to an agreement that they will go with Beyond to the Dark Continent, with Beyond as a prisoner. News reports about the continent are out, and Jing and Periston decide to play together before Jing appoints himself as the second in command. Leorio gets appointed as a Zodiac, and Kurapika gets recruited as well, mostly because it will help him find the remaining eyes. We then learn the 4th Kakin prince has them. Just so you know, I'm going to avoid saying his name at all costs. Then Jing gets some kickback from his self-appointment, but he basically pays everyone off. Then we get some additional history of the Dark Continent from him, and we learn that Gon can't use his Nen. He contacts Jing, who tells him to be grateful he's even alive in the first place. Then he gets a ton of homework, and Periston gets creepy while Jing monologues about plans. Squiggly Eyes is wondering if Jing is wasting his money, and we are introduced to the 4th prince as he murders 2 women in the name of art. Beyond signs his contract, and Kurapika meets the rest of the Zodiacs. Thanks to Kurapika, the Zodiacs finally put together that Beyond, the Temp Hunters, and Periston are working together. It's also very likely that there is a mole in the Zodiacs. We get an overview of the Zodiacs' roles, and they decide to alter the next Hunter exam specifically for this journey. Jing and Periston get in a fight with Beyond's contractors, but it ends pretty quickly. We then get introduced to Golem and everyone on Beyond's squad. The next Hunter exam is underway, and Kurapika is doing remote lie detection. Bang calls the 4th prince, and we learn about the succession war. The 4th prince then calls Theta, and we learn that all of his guards have passed the lie detector test. Then Mizai and Kurapika learn that Sayu is the mole and is working with Beyond. We then get introduced to all the princes, and the seed urn ceremony is completed. Then Kurapika learns of some job offers from the princes. He gathers his friends, and they all apply to one position in order to get close to the 4th prince. He hopes he will be assigned to 9th Prince Halkenberg, but unfortunately he is assigned to 14th Prince Wobble. Kurapika's friends also do not get assigned to the 4th prince, and we switch perspectives completely to Chrollo and Hisoka, who are finally having a fight to the death. Chrollo wins, but Hisoka lives thanks to Bungee Gum. He vows to kill every troop member on his own terms, and leaves Machi as the messenger. He then kills Cortopian Shellnark. Shortly after, the Black Will departs, and almost immediately one of Wobble's guards is killed. This leads to Kurapika discovering that most of the guards do not know about Nen or the succession war in the first place. Then 5 more of Wobble's staff are killed in the same manner as the first guy. At the same time, the first banquet is underway. Kacho starts to form a plan with Fugetsu, and Oida returns to her room to see the carnage. Kurapika explains explains what's going on and requires the other guards to be honest or they will die. Two of them admit to knowing about the succession war because they're informants from other queens. As the hunters discuss how the seed urn ceremony works, they see a bunch of Nen beasts. Kurapika uses the emergency phone channel to alert the rest of the princes about the existence of Nen beasts. He gets responses from his allies who confirm their existence. Bill and Kurapika talk about the nature of the parasitic Nen beasts, and then all the beasts disappear, except one, which is annoying Sayerd. Bill and Kurapika continue their conversation and discuss the position Kurapika is in and define safety for Prince Wobble. They decide an escape route would be ideal, but before they can continue, Sayerd kills every other guard. Kurapika swoops in, pins him down, and steals his Nen. Bill tells Kurapika his ability, and Kurapika deems it useful enough to put into Stealth Dolphin. Without Nen in the body, the beast leaves. Then Sayerd is arrested, and Bill and Kurapika resume their conversation about escaping the ship. Wobble is already down to 2 guards. A couple rooms over, 7th Queen Savanti is diverting guards from the 12th Prince to the 13th Prince. At the same time, Halkenberg wants to withdraw from the succession war, and Tebeppa wants an alliance with the 4th Prince. Shortly after, Theta and Salkov discuss how to explain Nen to the 4th Prince. They decide to have Theta teach him and do it in the slowest way possible. We then see the 6th, 7th, and 8th Prince's reactions to Nen beasts, and it seems like something happened to Halkenberg's people. Theta comes face to face with the 4th Prince's Nen beast and it scares her. Back at the banquet, the 1st and 2nd Queen get into an argument, and it sets Benjamin off, which is how we learn he has Nen. Ben learns of Nen beasts from Balsamico after being calmed down by him. He will have to alter their escort plans due to Nen beasts, and Kurapika revealing Nen means the 1st Prince lost a big advantage. After considering some options, Ben decides he wants to assign his private guards to all of the lower princes. They are supposed to protect the princes, but are authorized to use lethal force if needed. One of the 1st Prince's guards arrives at the 14th Prince's room and kills one of the servants under the guise of self-defense. He talks with Kurapika, and Kurapika gives the stolen Nen ability to Oido. This distracts the assassin, which allows Bill to get in close, and allows Kurapika to drain him of his Nen for a quick subdue. The assassin ends himself with a pill in his molar. This exchange confuses Ben and Balsamico, who are listening via a bug. Kurapika tells Oido about the time constraint on his ability, and they begin searching for an animal to control. Kurapika gets a call from 3 different princes trying to talk to him, and at the same time Babimia arrives at the door. Kurapika ends up talking to the 3rd Prince thanks to Shimano, and they decide to meet. Then Kurapika talks to the 5th Prince's liaison, and they discuss a truce, but it will be dependent on a return call in 1 hour. He then departs with Oido to head to the 3rd Prince's quarters. Bill and Babimia stay behind. Kurapika arrives at the 3rd Prince's and starts explaining Nen to him and Queen Oido. Then we get an overview of what every single prince is doing, before Kurapika and co return to the 14th Prince's quarters. He determines his power is more deadly than he thought, and then we get our first look at the 3rd tier where Krollo is looking very upset. Kurapika's team continues to look for a bug so Oido can use the stolen ability. Shortly after, he asks all of the guests to move out of the master bedroom, and this is when they see a cockroach. Kurapika uses this opportunity to show an example of Nen, and it works on multiple fronts. He also tells the visitors that he wants to give every prince's guards the chance to learn Nen, and the visitors spread the word. Using the bug, Oido learns about the 13th Prince and stumbles upon the assassination of 12th Prince Momose. Oido gets upset and forces the guards to confirm what she saw. Babimia leaves, and Bill confirms 10 princes are joining the class, then Kurapika faints. Meanwhile, Hanzo wants to get revenge for the 12th Prince's death, and the 4th Prince hears about the timeline Kurapika set out for Nen. It is different from Theta's. She claims the 4th Prince can trust him, but his Nen beast gives her a cut on the cheek for lying. Finally, on day 2, Kurapika wakes up and realizes he was out for 9 hours. The Queen wakes up at the same time, and he convinces the Queen to look into the 4th Prince for strategic purposes. She guides the roach to his room, and it's immediately killed by his Nen beast. Oido freaks out, and after she calms down, Kurapika tells her that she is already capable of using Nen. The classes begin, and we're introduced to a bunch of people that aren't really that important. Kurapika sets some ground rules, and Muhan immediately tests them. He continues the class, and shortly after, Silent Majority, somebody's ability, kills Bard again. One of the maids is immediately blamed, and Sakala wants Queen Psycho arrested, but the judicial branch denies this request due to circumstantial evidence. They send an investigator instead. Kurapika keeps teaching, and the Phantom Troop beats up some thugs for information. They make the thugs get the room number of every person over 6'2". We then see Momose's casket in this weird room. Hanzo gets his revenge, but when he tries to return to the 13th Prince's room, everyone is gone except his Nen beast. Shortly after, Camilla gets killed by Muse, who then gets eaten by Camilla's Nen ability, which brings her back to life. She goes to Ben under the guise that one of his guards tried to kill her, but it doesn't work, and she's arrested for attempting to kill him instead. She is imprisoned, and Muse's ability is inherited by Ben. Hanzo asks Kurapika for assistance, and they contact Virgie, who is skeptical at first, but comes around once he learns Bisky can step on him. Fugetsu discovers a weird door in her room, and it brings her to Kacho's room. Meanwhile, the 8th Prince is being scoped out by one of Benjamin's guards, and then a coin drops from the 3rd Prince's Nen beast. Another one of Ben's guards watches the effects of Halkenberg's beast, and it raises alarms for him. Then Halkenberg goes to see his dad, but is denied access. Fugetsu experiments with her Nen beast, and the court case over Muse's death begins. It is decided that both the 2nd and 1st Prince will be placed under surveillance and house arrest. Muhan is killed by the assassin, and the 5th Prince's guard wants to end the class due to risk, but Bellorante talks him out of it. Then Kacho forms a plan and shares it with Melody via Morse code. Another coin drops from the 3rd Prince's beast, and Fugetsu learns more about her ability. The 4th Prince learns of Muhan's death, and we learn the 4th Prince is a specialist. Kacho wants to put on a musical performance with her, Fugetsu, and Melody. Then we switch perspectives to the Phantom Troop. The Mafia asks them to move, and they oblige under the guise of cooperation. They split up to find Hisoka. The Mafia leaders are concerned about the troop due to the possibility of imbalance. Then Marina tells a bunch of people to kill a bunch of people, and she also kisses them. Binks' group heads to storage for for their belongings, and they run into a dead body. Mizai interviews a witness of the murder who turns out to be another Highly associate. The spiders in storage follow the trail of blood that leads to the Cha office, and they talk to Kenny, who is threatened by them. At the same time, Franklin talks to an old lady as he refutes that the troop is behind the murders. Kenny and Finks finish their conversation and work together for now, and Mizai convinces the law enforcement to do more about the crime sprees that are occurring. He and Bodobai agree that a conflict is coming soon. They place the bottom 3 tiers under martial law and find 2 unauthorized people, Illumi and Prince Fugetsu. She and Mizai talk before she is returned to her room and placed under surveillance. Melody plays with Melody and has a conversation with this unnamed guy, and he offers to help, but Melody is suspicious because of his heartbeat. Lihan kills the 8th Prince's Nenbeast and switches places with Ushohi. The room lockdown is lifted and Halkenberg gets to the king by threatening the guards. He talks to his father about stopping the succession war and the king refuses. Halkenberg tries to kill him, but he stops the bullet. He then tries to kill himself, but his Nenbeast saves him. The king tells Halkenberg if he wants to change the country, he will need to be king. This causes a change of heart, and he decides to fight in the succession war until the bitter end. One of Ben's guards confronts him, and using his new power, he takes over his will. Kurapika notices another rumbling, the 8th prince is killed, and another banquet begins. Basho has a rap battle, and the rest of the concert continues until it's Melody's turn. She begins, and Kini leads Kacho and Fugetsu towards the lifeboats. They escape, and Kini ends himself, as he knows someone has to take the fall, and he's been looking for a time to die. The girls succeed. They make it outside the ship, but only for a moment, before they are threatened by these dark hands. Using Fugetsu's Nenbeast, they head back to safety, or so it seems. In reality, Kacho has been killed. It is her Nenbeast that has rejoined Fugetsu in the tunnel. Finks and crew meet with the Cha family. They agree to find the assassin, and are warned that a war is likely soon to happen. Then we go back in time a bit and see the 4th prince create a second Nenbeast, then he trains Zetsu with Theta, and she kills him. But not really, because he has a crazy Nen ability. The attempt is interrupted by Melody's performance, then Theta passes out and gets a threat from the horse. She wakes up with a rash and Salkov takes over their mission. Meanwhile, Melody is being detained for her performance, and we get an explanation of Halkenberg's ability. Then Sumadori ends his stay in Shikaku's body, and the 1st prince recalls his soldier from 1007. Kurapika tries to discern the location of the rumbling, and begins teaching water divination. The 4th prince keeps training, and we see his side of his murder, and learn about his ability as well. Kurapika opens Maora's nodes, and it's confirmed by the 1st prince's guards that he's not manipulating anyone. Bill and Kurapika have a heart-to-heart, and Maora convinces Tobeppa that the Nen Awakening classes are worth it. The Predator guy has a long monologue about how to use his ability, and then a 4th rumble is noticed by Kurapika. The 1st prince learns the specifics of Shikaku's death, and after some deliberation decides to continue investigation. The next day, they receive a message saying Halkenberg is basically invincible, and decide the best way to stop Halkenberg is to separate him from his men. They do this by putting him on trial for murder. The trial quickly comes to a standstill. Ben's guards believe Maknae has been manipulated into killing the 7th prince, and Basho agrees. But not really. He thinks the 1st prince is behind all of this. We are then introduced to Mozwana, who curses Benjamin to death. The value of the 3rd prince's coins increases, and he believes it is a gift for his people after he wins. He meets with the leader of the Ziyu family, and asks him to research Nen and Nen beasts. The leader orders the death of Morena, and we are introduced to Lynch and Zakuro, who arrive on deck 3 and immediately get in a fight. They win without much trouble, and follow their boss towards the Highly headquarters. And that is where it ends. Thank you so much for watching. This is by far my most ambitious video in the history of my channel, so I very much appreciate the support. If you made it this far, please consider subscribing. It would really mean a lot, and you obviously like the content. I'll see you on Monday for my first Hunter x Hunter breakdown, and thank you again for watching.